She woke up early in the morning when the sky was still gray and cold. The house was quiet except for the sound of the wind against the broken window and the soft creaking of the old wooden floor. Everything felt heavy around her as she stood and looked at the small kitchen. She had already made coffee every day for the last few months, but this morning the taste felt bitter. It reminded her that she was alone and that her future was uncertain. Her husband had died suddenly and left her with many responsibilities that she did not feel ready for. She had no family nearby, and the few neighbors she knew were busy with their own lives. She had always been strong, but this time it felt different. She had to take care of herself and her children and make sure they had a home and food and safety. It was more than she thought she could manage alone. After finishing her coffee, she walked outside. The wind was cold on her face, and it made her shiver. She looked at the garden, which had become wild and unkempt. The flowers had died, the grass was tall, and the small fence that used to be neat was now broken in several places. She felt a pang of sadness because it reminded her of better days. Days when her husband was alive and they would work together in the garden, laughing and talking about small things. Those days were gone, and now all she could do was try to survive. She started picking up some fallen branches and weeds and trying to make the garden look a little better. It was hard work, but it gave her something to focus on. She had bills to pay and debts to manage. She had spent the last few months trying to figure out how to make ends meet. She had sold some old furniture, worked odd jobs in town, and asked for help from local organizations, but it was never enough. The debts kept piling up and the house still needed repairs. Every creak of the floor or draft from the broken windows reminded her that time was running out. She worried about the future of her children. They were young and needed stability and love, and she wanted to give them everything she could. But it felt like the world was against her. She had dreams for them that seemed impossible now. She wanted them to have a good education, a warm home, and a life without fear. But each day felt like a battle she was barely winning. While she was working in the garden, she noticed someone standing at the edge of the property. It was a man, a cowboy from the nearby town. He was quiet and shy, often keeping to himself. She had seen him around, but they had never spoken. He was tall and strong, but his movements were careful and gentle. He watched her for a moment and then nodded slightly before walking away. She felt a strange feeling in her chest. She did not know him, but somehow he gave her a sense of hope. Maybe it was because he seemed to understand hard work and responsibility. Maybe it was because he seemed real and honest in a world that sometimes felt cold and unfair. The day went on slowly. She fixed what she could in the house. The roof had leaks and the walls had cracks. She patched them as best she could, but she knew it was not enough. She wanted to do more, but her strength was limited and the supplies were expensive. She tried not to think about the money she did not have because it made her feel helpless. She focused instead on small victories. A wall patched, a window cleaned, a meal made for her children. Each small success felt like a step forward in a world that often seemed to be moving backward. Her children came home from school and they were tired but happy. They did not complain about the cold or the small meals or the broken toys. They trusted her, and that gave her courage. She wanted to give them more than she had, but she knew that love and care mattered more than material things. She made them dinner and listened to their stories about the day. She laughed when they told her funny things and felt proud when they showed her their drawings. It was moments like these that reminded her why she had to keep going. It was not just about survival, but about giving her children hope and security. Evening came and she was exhausted. She sat by the window and looked at the sunset. The sky was painted in shades of orange and purple, and it reminded her that life could still have beauty even in hard times. She thought about the cowboy again. She did not know his name or much about him, but something about his presence felt comforting. Maybe it was because he seemed to care without saying much. Maybe it was because he represented strength and patience, qualities she needed in herself. She wondered if she could ask him for help. It felt strange to think about relying on someone else, but she knew she could not do everything alone. She had to be brave for her children and for herself. That night she made a decision. She would talk to the cowboy and ask for help. She did not know how he would react or if he would agree, but she had to try. She wanted to save her home, her children's future, and her own peace of mind. She went to bed thinking about the conversation she would have and how she would explain her situation. She felt nervous, but also hopeful. Hope was something she had not felt in a long time, and it gave her a small spark of energy. Sleep came slowly, but she dreamed of a future where her house was warm and safe, where her children laughed without worry, and where she could breathe without fear. She dreamed of a life where she was not alone, where someone kind and strong could walk beside her and help carry the weight of the world. The cowboy in her dreams was not just a man, but a symbol of trust and support, something she had been missing for so long. She woke up before dawn with determination. Today would be the day she reached out. She would take a step that might change everything. She knew it would not be easy, but she also knew that taking no action meant losing everything she cared about. She dressed quietly so as not to wake her children and stepped outside into the cool morning air. She looked at the garden, the house, and the path ahead. She felt fear, but also courage. She took a deep breath and started walking toward the place where she had seen the cowboy the day before. She did not know what he would say or how he would react, but she had made up her mind. She had to try. The wind blew gently, and for a moment it felt like the world was listening. She hoped he would understand, and hope would meet her halfway. She walked slowly down the dusty path toward the edge of her property where she had seen the cowboy before. The morning air was crisp and carried the faint smell of hay from the nearby fields. Her heart beat faster with every step because she was about to ask for something she had never asked before. She had always been independent and proud, but now she realized that she could not manage alone. She needed help to save her home and give her children a secure life. The thought of approaching someone made her nervous, but she reminded herself that this was not about pride, but survival. Her children were counting on her. She could not let fear hold her back. When she reached the fence, she saw the cowboy leaning against a post. He was looking toward the fields with a calm expression, his hat pulled low over his face. He seemed peaceful yet strong, someone who could carry the weight of hard work without complaint. She cleared her throat softly so he would hear her, and he turned slowly. His eyes met hers, and she noticed a flicker of surprise that quickly changed into understanding. He nodded slightly, inviting her to speak. She took a deep breath and began to explain her situation. She told him about her husband, how he had passed away suddenly, and how she was left with debts and a house that needed repairs. She spoke about her children and how much she wanted to give them a safe and warm home. Her voice trembled at times, but she continued because she had to be honest. She could not hide the fear and worry that had been her constant companions. The cowboy listened quietly, without interrupting. He did not offer advice or judgments, but his eyes were kind and patient. She noticed that he seemed to understand her in a way others did not. He nodded occasionally and gave small gestures of encouragement, but remained mostly silent. That silence was not empty. It was a space where her words could exist without being dismissed. She felt relief that someone was truly listening. When she finished speaking, she waited, unsure of what he would say. The wind blew softly, and the fields were quiet except for the distant sound of cattle moving. She felt exposed and vulnerable, but also hopeful. After a moment, he spoke. His voice was low and steady, not loud but full of calm assurance. He told her that he would help. He did not ask many questions or make her justify herself. He said that everyone faced struggles, and that sometimes the right thing to do was to lend a hand. His words were simple, but they carried weight. She felt a rush of gratitude and relief wash over her. She wanted to smile, but tears came instead. She had been carrying so much on her own for months, and now someone was willing to share the burden. She thanked him quietly, and he nodded, understanding that words were not always needed to express feelings. They began planning the work together. He suggested starting with the most urgent repairs to the house, fixing leaks and broken windows. He also offered to help negotiate with creditors and manage some of the bills that had become overwhelming. She listened carefully and felt a sense of order returning to her life. The cowboy was organized and methodical, someone who could take practical steps without getting overwhelmed. She realized that his shyness did not mean weakness. It meant patience and thoughtfulness. She felt safe knowing he would not rush her or judge her. They could work together at a steady pace, and she would not have to face everything alone. The first days of working together were tiring but hopeful. They climbed ladders, patched walls, and carried heavy supplies. The cowboy was strong but careful, always making sure she could manage what she was lifting. She appreciated his quiet presence. He never bragged about his strength or knowledge. He simply did what was needed and expected no praise. They shared few words, but their actions spoke volumes. She began to trust him not only with tasks, but with her worries and fears. She could talk about her debts, her children, and her anxieties without fear of judgment. He listened and offered practical advice when necessary, but mostly he let her take the lead while he supported her. It was a partnership that felt rare and valuable. Neighbors noticed the changes at her house. Some were curious, others skeptical. They whispered about the widow asking for help from a shy cowboy. She ignored the gossip because it did not matter. What mattered was that her home was becoming safer, and her children had a stable environment. The roof was patched, the windows repaired, and the walls reinforced. The garden slowly returned to life with small plants and flowers that survived the neglect. Each small success felt like a victory. She began to feel that maybe the future was not as hopeless as she had feared. With the cowboy's help, she could see a path forward. As they worked, she learned small things about him. He rarely spoke about his own life, but sometimes he would mention small details that gave her insight. He had grown up in the area and had lost people close to him too. His shyness was not weakness, but a way to navigate the world carefully. He valued honesty and hard work and expected the same from others. She admired these qualities and felt grateful that he was willing to use them to help her. She began to see him as more than just a helper. He was someone she could rely on and trust with her family's well-being. She realized that sometimes help came from unexpected places, and people who seemed quiet and distant could have the greatest impact. Evenings were spent sitting quietly after long days of work. They would watch the sunset and talk about simple things like the weather, the crops, and small dreams for the future. Those moments were peaceful and restorative. She felt her anxiety lessen because she was not alone. She could share her thoughts without fear, and she could see that someone cared. The cowboy did not try to rush her or fix everything at once. He simply helped in practical ways, and his presence gave her strength. She began to feel a sense of stability that she had not felt since her husband died. Her children noticed it too, and they smiled more, laughed more, and seemed happier. She knew that their safety and happiness were beginning to return. One afternoon, while they were working on the roof, she slipped slightly, but he caught her immediately. The surprise of the fall and the strength of his support made her heart race. She looked at him and saw concern in his eyes. She realized that he was not just helping with the house, but also looking out for her well-being. She felt a strange warmth in her chest, a feeling she had not expected. It was not love in the usual sense, but a deep gratitude and respect. She trusted him with her life and her family's safety, and that trust was powerful. She knew that she could rely on him not just for physical help, but for emotional support too. Days turned into weeks, and the house slowly transformed. Each repaired window, each patched wall, and each planted flower was a symbol of progress. The children began to feel more secure, and their laughter returned. She noticed that she could sleep better at night because the constant worry had lessened. She still faced challenges and debts, but now she had a partner who would help carry the burden. The cowboy remained quiet and reserved, but his actions spoke louder than words. She realized that courage could come in many forms, and sometimes the quietest people could be the most brave. As the season changed and the air grew warmer, she felt a shift in her life. She had begun to see hope again. She no longer felt completely alone. She had found someone who would stand by her and her children. She knew that there would still be hard days and obstacles to overcome, but she also knew that together they could face them. She was no longer afraid of the future because she had someone to share it with. The cowboy had become a silent anchor in her life, steady and reliable, giving her the courage to keep moving forward. She began to dream of a future where her home was safe, her children were happy, and life felt possible again. She had asked for help, and the quiet cowboy had answered. That simple act of reaching out had changed everything. The days grew longer and warmer as spring settled into the town. She woke each morning to the sound of birds and the soft rustling of leaves in the trees. The house no longer felt empty and lonely because the cowboy was there. Helping with repairs and sharing small conversations, they had developed a rhythm that worked. She would plan what needed to be done, and he would quietly help, offering suggestions when needed, but mostly letting her take the lead. She was surprised at how comfortable it felt to have someone beside her, someone who listened and understood without judgment. It was strange to rely on another person, but she realized that strength could come from partnership. Together, they tackled the chores that had seemed impossible alone. The roof needed more attention than she had imagined, and the walls still had cracks that needed careful repair. They worked side by side, sometimes in silence, sometimes exchanging short comments about progress or small stories about their pasts. Each day the house looked stronger, safer, and more like home. She felt pride in their accomplishments and relief that her children would soon have a secure place to grow. She began to trust the cowboy not only with work, but with her thoughts and worries. He never laughed at her fears or dismissed her concerns. He simply listened, sometimes nodding, sometimes offering practical advice. She had never met anyone who gave so much of themselves quietly and consistently. It made her feel understood and cared for in a way she had not felt in a long time. The children noticed the change too. They played more freely and seemed happier. They no longer worried about the leaking roof or broken windows because the cowboy made it clear that their home was being cared for. Their laughter became a source of motivation for her and a reminder that the effort was worth every ache. In her body and every worry in her mind, she noticed small gestures that showed his care. He would fix a chair that wobbled, carry heavy boxers without being asked, and make sure the children had fresh water or snacks. He was never overbearing or loud. His strength and kindness were steady and quiet, a presence that brought calm to her otherwise anxious days. She felt safe with him around and began to believe that life could be different. One afternoon, while fixing the back porch, she slipped and almost fell, but he was there instantly. He held her steady and looked at her with concern. She felt warmth spread through her chest, a mix of relief and something she could not quite name. It was not romantic yet, but it was a deep trust and appreciation that grew each day. She realized that help could come in forms she had never expected. She had always thought of independence as the only way to survive, but now she understood that leaning on someone else at the right time could be a source of strength, not weakness. They shared small victories and challenges alike. The garden began to bloom with new life, and the house became more secure. She felt pride in the progress and found herself looking forward to each day. The cowboy, once distant and shy, became a steady companion. He did not demand anything from her, but offered his time, effort, and care generously. She found comfort in his presence and began to hope again. One evening, they sat on the porch watching the sunset. The children were inside, laughing and playing as she listened from the doorway. She felt peace settle over her, a sensation she had not felt in months. The cowboy spoke softly about the upcoming weather and small things in the town. She listened and realized that life was slowly returning to a rhythm that felt manageable. She did not have all the answers or solutions, but she knew that together they could face challenges. That night she dreamed not of what she had lost, but of what could be. She imagined a home filled with laughter, safety, and warmth. She imagined days where hard work was rewarded and nights where she could rest without fear. She imagined a life where someone quietly cared for her and her children without expectation or demand. Her dreams were fragile, yet filled with hope. Over the next weeks, they continued to repair the house and manage the debts that had weighed so heavily on her. The cowboy had a methodical way of solving problems. He made lists, organized tasks, and tackled the hardest jobs first. She followed his lead when necessary, but often found that she could make decisions with more confidence now that he supported her. She began to see herself not just as a struggling widow, but as a capable person with resources and allies. Their communication was often minimal, but effective. A nod, a glance, or a simple instruction was enough to coordinate difficult tasks. She appreciated his quiet way of interacting because it allowed her to feel independent while also being supported. She felt empowered in a way she had not imagined possible. Her children were thriving as well. They noticed the roof was stronger, the windows were intact, and the garden had space to play. Their questions were simple but heartfelt, and she answered them honestly about the work being done and why it was important. She realized that transparency with her children gave them confidence and a sense of security. She was proud of how they adapted and learned from the changes around them. Each evening, she and the cowboy would review the progress and plan for the next day. They did not need long conversations because their actions spoke louder than words. She found comfort in the predictability of their routine and the sense of partnership it created. Slowly, the anxiety that had plagued her began to fade. She could sleep better at night knowing that the house was becoming safe and her children were cared for. She realized that trust and patience were more powerful than fear and panic. She had taken a step to ask for help, and it had opened a path forward. One morning, while working in the garden, the cowboy pointed out a problem with the fence that she had not noticed. Together, they repaired it, laughing softly when a board fell or when the hammer slipped. Those small moments of shared work became memories she cherished. They reminded her that life could be meaningful even in ordinary tasks when shared with someone who cared. Weeks passed and spring became summer. The house was transformed. The walls were strong, the roof secure, and the garden thriving. She could see the progress in a way that made her chest swell with pride. The cowboy continued to help quietly and consistently, never asking for recognition or reward. She realized that this presence, steady and dependable, was becoming central to her life. She felt gratitude and a growing sense of security that she had not known since her husband died. The children noticed too. They smiled more freely, asked questions about the work, and expressed excitement about their home. She saw that their confidence and happiness were returning. She realized that the efforts she had made, combined with the cowboy's help, were creating a foundation not only for the house but for her family's future. She began to dream more boldly, imagining a life where challenges could be met together and where hope could grow despite difficulties. She understood that the future was no longer something to fear, but something to work toward. The cowboy had become a symbol of trust and quiet strength in her life. She knew that they would face more obstacles, but she felt ready to meet them. The partnership they had formed was strong, based on mutual respect, trust, and care. She had learned that help did not diminish her worth, and that shared effort could create opportunities that alone seemed impossible. As summer approached its peak, she felt a sense of accomplishment and relief. The house was safe, the children were happy, and she was no longer alone in facing life's challenges. She had taken a risk by asking for help, and it had changed everything. The cowboy remained quiet and humble, but she saw in his actions the depth of his care and commitment. She felt a connection that went beyond words, a partnership built on trust and shared purpose. She understood that life was not about facing struggles alone, but about finding allies who would stand beside you. She looked forward to the future with hope and confidence, ready to continue the work of building a home, raising her children, and nurturing the trust that had grown between them. The days were long and the work demanding, but with the cowboy by her side, she knew that they could face anything that came their way. She felt gratitude, relief, and a growing sense of peace, knowing that her family's future was no longer as uncertain as it had been, and that together they were creating a life worth living. As the summer days stretched longer, she found herself thinking more about the cowboy than she had expected. It was not just about the work or the repairs anymore. She had come to rely on his presence, his calm patience, and the quiet way he seemed to understand what needed to be done without words. She noticed little things about him now, like how he carefully placed tools so nothing was in the way, or how he always made sure her children had enough to drink when they were outside. It was a care that went beyond the house and chores. It touched her life and the lives of her children in ways she had not anticipated. She felt a mix of emotions she could not fully name. There was gratitude, trust, relief, and a growing sense of connection that seemed to deepen with each day they worked together. She wondered if he felt the same way, but his shyness made it hard to know. He rarely spoke about himself unless gently prompted, and even then he only shared small parts of his life. Memories of his family, or moments of hardship that explained why he was the way he was. She listened quietly, realizing that his reserve was not indifference, but a careful way of navigating the world. It made her respect him more and feel even closer to him. One afternoon, while they were painting the walls of the living room, she noticed the focus and care he took with each brushstroke. He did not rush, did not complain, and did not expect thanks. She felt warmth in her chest, a silent acknowledgement that his dedication was more than just duty. She realized that kindness could be quiet and strong at the same time. The children watched from nearby, asking questions about the colors and the work they were doing. She answered and saw the cowboy smile faintly at their curiosity. It was rare for him to show emotion openly, but in that moment she saw a softness that made her heart beat a little faster. She reminded herself to stay focused on the work because the house still had many tasks left. The roof needed further repairs, the garden required attention, and the debts still demanded careful planning. They made lists and tackled each challenge together. The cowboy suggested small improvements and helped her think through solutions she had not considered. She learned from him, not just about work, but about patience, planning, and quiet perseverance. She felt stronger and more capable because of his guidance. The townspeople began to notice the changes at her house. They stopped whispering and started to smile. Some even offered small help or advice, seeing that she had found a reliable companion in the cowboy. It was not important that others approve, but it gave her confidence that her decisions were right. She felt proud of how far they had come together. One evening, after a long day of work, they sat on the porch watching the sky turn shades of orange and purple. The children were inside, laughing and talking about their day. She felt a deep sense of calm as she watched the cowboy quietly enjoy the sunset. She wondered what he thought about the future, about her family, and about the bond that was growing between them. She wanted to ask but hesitated, not wanting to disrupt the peace. Instead, she let the silence hold the unspoken connection between them. She realized that trust did not always need words. It could exist in shared glances, small actions, and the feeling that someone was always there when needed. That night she lay awake thinking about how much her life had changed. She remembered the fear and anxiety that had filled her days before he arrived. Now she felt hope, a sense of security, and the possibility that life could be better than she had imagined. She thought about her children and the way their laughter had returned. She thought about the work they had accomplished and the way her home now felt alive again. She felt gratitude for the cowboy, for his quiet strength and steady support. Days passed and their partnership deepened further. They faced challenges that tested patience and skill, like unexpected repairs or shortages of materials. Each obstacle was met with problem-solving and teamwork. She realized that they complemented each other well. Her determination and vision, combined with his careful planning and skill, made them an effective team. She also noticed that she was beginning to trust him with more personal matters. She could talk about her fears, her dreams, and her hopes for the future without feeling judged. He listened, offered quiet guidance, and sometimes shared parts of his life that gave her insight into the kind of man he was. She began to see that his shyness was not a flaw, but a different kind of strength, one that could offer stability and care in a way that words alone could not. One afternoon, while working in the garden, they paused to rest under the shade of a tree. She asked about his childhood and family. He spoke softly about losses he had faced and lessons he had learned. She listened with empathy and understood that his life had not been easy. It explained some of his quiet nature, but also revealed a man who valued honesty, integrity, and hard work. She felt closer to him and appreciated the trust he showed by sharing those memories. The children ran around them, playing and laughing. She noticed how the cowboy interacted with them, patient and gentle, offering guidance without taking control. It made her heart swell with appreciation because she knew they were in good hands. She realized that the bond between them was not just about work, but about trust, care, and the subtle ways people show love and respect. The house continued to transform. Each repaired wall, patched roof, and blooming flower was a reminder of their hard work and dedication. She felt pride and relief that her home was becoming safe and welcoming. She also felt a sense of personal growth. She had learned to ask for help, to trust, and to rely on someone else without feeling weak. It was a lesson that gave her strength for the future. The cowboy became more comfortable around her and the children. He smiled more often, shared small jokes, and allowed himself to relax in ways he had not before. She cherished these moments, seeing them as signs of a deepening connection. She felt that she could trust him not only with her home but with her heart. One evening, as they were finishing work for the day, a sudden rainstorm approached. They hurried to secure tools and cover the garden. She was wet and cold, but he offered her his coat and helped her to the porch. They sat together, watching the rain and listening to the rhythm of droplets on the roof. It was a simple moment, but it carried meaning. She felt cared for, protected, and less alone in the world. She realized that life could offer unexpected support and that trust could grow in quiet, patient ways. Weeks went by, and their bond continued to strengthen. The house was nearly complete, the garden thriving, and the children happy and safe. She felt a sense of accomplishment and relief. She could now imagine a future that was secure and filled with possibilities. She also knew that the cowboy had become more than a helper. He was a part of their lives, a silent partner who offered care, guidance, and steady support. She felt gratitude, admiration, and a growing warmth that she could not ignore. As summer gave way to autumn, she reflected on how far they had come. The fear that had once dominated her life was now replaced with hope and trust. She had learned that asking for help was not weakness, and that sharing the burden could create strength. She had found someone who would stand beside her and her children through challenges and joys alike. She felt confident that together they could face whatever came next, and that her family's future was no longer as uncertain as it had once seemed. The cowboy had become a symbol of stability, trust, and quiet strength. She felt a deep appreciation for him and for the life they were building together, knowing that the bond they shared would continue to guide and support them in the days to come. The days grew shorter as autumn approached, and the house and garden were now fully transformed. She woke each morning with a sense of purpose and calm that she had not felt in months. The children were happy and thriving, the home was safe and warm, and her mind was free from constant worry. She had learned so much about resilience, trust, and the quiet strength of human connection. The cowboy continued to be a steady presence, always helpful, always patient, never seeking recognition but giving his time and care generously. She noticed small details each day that reminded her of his devotion. He would fix a broken hinge without a word, carry heavy supplies carefully, and make sure her children had everything they needed for school and play. His actions spoke louder than words, and she appreciated them deeply. She felt a growing warmth in her heart, a gratitude that extended beyond simple thanks. She realized that life could offer unexpected support, and that sometimes the people who appeared quiet and reserved had the most to give. One afternoon, they worked together to repair a small shed in the back of the property. The wood was old and splintered, and the task was difficult. They lifted, measured, and hammered together, coordinating without much speech. She watched him carefully and realized how much she had come to rely on his skill, strength, and steady presence. She felt a sense of partnership that was rare and valuable. He glanced at her with a small smile, and she felt a warmth that spread through her chest. She knew that this connection went beyond friendship or simple assistance. There was trust, understanding, and a shared commitment to something larger than themselves. The children played nearby, laughing and asking questions about the work they were doing. She answered and watched the cowboy respond with patience and kindness. It was clear that he cared deeply, not only about the home but about their happiness and security. She felt relief knowing that they were safe and supported. Over the next weeks, they completed the remaining tasks. The roof was solid, the walls secure, and the garden flourishing. The house was no longer a place of worry, but a home full of life and hope. She reflected on how far they had come together. The journey had been hard, filled with long days, challenges, and moments of doubt. Yet they had accomplished more than she had thought possible. She had learned to ask for help, to trust another person, and to share her life with someone who understood and cared. The cowboy had become more than a helper. He had become a trusted companion, someone who offered steady support, quiet strength, and a presence that brought comfort and hope. She felt a deep appreciation for him and the role he played in their lives. One evening, after a long day of work and laughter with the children, they sat on the porch watching the sunset. The sky was painted with shades of orange, pink, and purple. She looked at him and realized how much her life had changed since she first approached him. She had been afraid, uncertain, and alone. Now, she felt hope, confidence, and a sense of belonging. The cowboy sat beside her quietly, his presence steady and reassuring. She wanted to tell him how much she appreciated him, but words felt insufficient. Instead, she let the silence carry the depth of her feelings, knowing he understood without needing them to be spoken. The children ran inside to grab a blanket and return with drinks. They laughed, shared stories, and brought life to the porch. She watched them and felt pride and relief. The future no longer seemed uncertain. She knew that whatever challenges came next, they would face them together. She could see the possibility of a life filled with stability, joy, and love. The cowboy stood and suggested they check the windows before nightfall. They walked together, side by side, making small adjustments and repairs. His quiet guidance was steady and reliable, and she felt grateful for his presence. She noticed how natural it felt to have him beside her, to rely on his skill and care without hesitation. That night, she lay awake thinking about the journey they had taken. She remembered the fear, uncertainty, and struggles she had faced when her husband passed away. She thought about the moments of doubt, the long days of work, and the nights filled with worry. Yet now she felt gratitude, hope, and a sense of accomplishment. She realized that asking for help had been the turning point, opening a door to support, trust, and partnership. The cowboy had become a symbol of strength, reliability, and care in her life. She felt safe, understood, and valued. Over the following weeks, they settled into a routine that balanced work, family, and quiet companionship. She watched her children grow more confident, independent, and happy. She noticed how their laughter and curiosity reflected the stability and love surrounding them. She saw that the effort they had put into the house and garden had created not only a physical space, but a nurturing environment for growth and happiness. One afternoon, while sitting on the porch, she turned to the cowboy and asked about his future. He spoke quietly about his hopes and dreams, about the simple pleasures of life, and the importance of caring for those around him. She listened attentively, appreciating the insight and thoughtfulness in his words. She realized that she had come to value his perspective, not only for the work they accomplished, but for the way he approached life. She felt a deep respect and trust that had grown naturally over time. As autumn deepened, the house glowed with warmth from the sun and the memories of the hard work they had shared. The garden was full of life, and the children played freely without fear or worry. She felt a sense of peace that had been missing for so long. She knew that the future was no longer uncertain. She had a home, a family, and a companion who brought strength, patience, and care to their lives. She reflected on the journey, understanding that it had been about more than repairs and work. It had been about trust, partnership, and discovering the quiet power of human connection. She had faced fear and uncertainty and emerged stronger, more capable, and hopeful. The cowboy had become an integral part of their lives, not through words or grand gestures, but through consistent, quiet support and care. She felt a profound sense of gratitude and relief. On the first crisp morning of late autumn, she stepped outside to see the sun rising over the fields. The air was cool and fresh, and she breathed deeply, appreciating the simple beauty around her. She felt her children close by, playing and laughing, and the cowboy standing silently but attentively nearby. She realized that life had changed in ways she could never have imagined when she first faced despair. She felt hope, joy, and the quiet satisfaction of knowing that together they had overcome challenges and built a life worth living. She knew that the days ahead would still hold difficulties, but she felt confident in their ability to face them together. The cowboy had become a part of their lives, a presence that offered trust, strength, and unwavering support. She felt a sense of peace, gratitude, and anticipation for the future. She understood that asking for help had been an act of courage that transformed their lives, creating a home filled with safety, love, and hope. The future was no longer something to fear. It was a place of possibilities, strengthened by partnership, trust, and the quiet power of caring for one another. The first days of winter brought a crisp chill to the air and a quiet beauty to the landscape. She woke early, listening to the soft rustle of leaves and the distant sound of birds searching for food. The house was warm and cozy, the repairs they had made holding steady against the cold wind. She looked around at her children, who were already busy with small tasks and play, and felt a deep sense of pride and peace. Their laughter echoed softly through the rooms and reminded her of the journey they had taken to reach this point. It was more than just the physical repairs to the house or the garden. It was about trust, teamwork, and discovering that support could come in quiet, steady ways. She reflected on how much had changed since she first met the shy cowboy, who had become a steady presence in their lives. His care, patience, and quiet strength had helped transform not only their home, but her own confidence and sense of hope. She watched him outside, stacking firewood for the coming cold days. The motion was methodical, practiced, and calm. He glanced up and nodded at her, and she felt a warmth in her chest, a silent recognition that the bond between them had grown deeper than words could express. She realized that their partnership had shifted into something more than practical help. It was trust, care, and a quiet companionship that filled a void she had felt since her husband died. Each day brought new moments that reinforced that connection. When she faced doubts or fears, he offered reassurance not with words but with action and presence. When her children were in need, he was there to guide and protect without demanding attention or praise. She learned to rely on him without feeling weak and to appreciate his careful attention to their needs. One morning, they worked together in the small vegetable garden, covering plants to protect them from frost. The children helped too, carrying small tools and chatting with curiosity. She noticed how naturally the cowboy guided them, teaching without command and encouraging without pressure. She felt gratitude for his patience and skill, recognizing that he had become a mentor as well as a protector. The winter days were long, but filled with purpose. She and the cowboy maintained the house, prepared for the cold, and shared small moments of reflection and quiet conversation. They talked about dreams for the future, hopes for the children, and the value of the home they had built together. His words were thoughtful, never rushed, and always offered insight without judgment. She listened and learned from him, finding comfort in the steadiness of his guidance. One evening, as the sun set and painted the sky in shades of pink and orange, she realized how much her perspective had changed. She had begun to see challenges not as insurmountable obstacles, but as opportunities to grow, learn, and rely on the connections she had built. The cowboy had shown her that strength could come in many forms and that quiet support could carry weight as heavy as physical labor. She thought about the children, laughing in the background, and felt relief that they now had security and stability. The house, once a source of worry and fear, was now a place of warmth, comfort, and life. She appreciated the cowboy's consistent presence and realized that he had become a trusted member of the family. The children had grown confident, learning to manage tasks and explore their surroundings safely. She watched them and felt pride and gratitude for the lessons they had learned about cooperation, patience, and trust. The cowboy's influence was subtle but strong, guiding without imposing and supporting without overstepping. She marveled at the way he had quietly helped shape their daily lives and the sense of stability they now enjoyed. One afternoon, while tending to the firewood, he mentioned a small repair needed in the barn. They worked together efficiently, planning their steps and executing the tasks with care. She noticed the way he carefully measured and adjusted, ensuring everything was secure. She learned from his attention to detail and began to anticipate the steps needed for each task, feeling more confident in her own abilities. The collaboration strengthened their partnership and reinforced the trust between them. The winter months continued, bringing challenges in the form of cold winds and early frosts. She noticed how much she had changed since the start of their journey. She was more patient, confident, and resilient. The children thrived under the sense of stability and guidance, showing curiosity, creativity, and joy in their daily activities. She realized that the home they had built together was more than a shelter. It was a foundation for growth, learning, and connection. She and the cowboy had created a safe environment where challenges could be met together and life could be experienced fully. One evening, as the first snow began to fall, she stepped outside to watch the quiet beauty of the flakes settling on the ground. The cowboy joined her, standing silently beside her as they observed the transformation of the world around them. She felt a sense of calm and wonder, recognizing the journey they had taken and the strength they had discovered together. She felt gratitude for his patience, skill, and steady presence. The snow covered the garden, the roof, and the paths, creating a serene landscape that mirrored the peace she felt inside. She realized that they had created more than a home. They had built a life filled with trust, care, and the quiet power of partnership. The children ran outside, laughing and playing in the snow. She watched them and felt pride, knowing that they were safe, happy, and learning the values of resilience and cooperation. The cowboy guided them gently, encouraging safe play and ensuring they were protected from the cold. She appreciated the balance he brought to their lives, blending guidance with freedom and support with independence. As the days passed, the winter deepened, bringing long nights and cold mornings. She noticed how much the cowboy had become a part of her life and the lives of her children. His quiet presence, patience, and skill provided stability and comfort. She reflected on the journey they had shared, from the first moments of fear and uncertainty to the current peace and hope that filled their home. Each challenge they faced had strengthened their bond and prepared them for the future. One afternoon, she and the cowboy prepared a small area for indoor planting, creating a space where herbs and vegetables could grow during the cold months. They worked together, measuring, planting, and tending the small garden. She felt a sense of accomplishment and pride, recognizing that even in the harshness of winter, life and growth were possible with care and patience. The children joined them, excited to help and learn. She noticed how the cowboy guided them with quiet instruction, showing them the importance of nurturing and attention to detail. She felt grateful for the lessons he brought to their lives and the positive influence he had on their growth. Days turned into weeks, and the winter progressed. She observed the strength and resilience that had developed within herself, her children, and the cowboy. They faced challenges together, supported each other through moments of doubt, and celebrated small victories. She realized that the journey had not only transformed their home, but also their spirits. She felt a deep sense of fulfillment and hope, knowing that they had created a life filled with stability, trust, and the quiet power of care. One evening, as they sat by the fire, she reflected on how far they had come. She had faced fear, uncertainty, and loss, but had discovered strength, resilience, and companionship. The cowboy had been a guiding presence, offering support, care, and steady strength. She felt a profound gratitude and appreciation for the role he played in their lives. The children slept peacefully nearby, their dreams safe and warm. She realized that the future was no longer a source of fear, but a place of possibility, hope, and growth. She knew that together they could face whatever challenges lay ahead. The home they had built was more than a structure. It was a sanctuary of trust, love, and connection. She felt confident, strong, and ready to continue nurturing the life they had created together. The cowboy remained quietly attentive, his presence a symbol of reliability and care. She appreciated the balance he brought to their lives, blending guidance, patience, and quiet strength. She understood that true partnership was not always about words, but about consistent action, support, and trust. The winter continued with its beauty and challenges. She felt a sense of pride and satisfaction as she watched her children play, learn, and grow. She knew that the journey they had taken had shaped them all, teaching lessons of resilience, trust, and the value of quiet support. She looked forward to the days ahead with hope, knowing that they had the foundation, the skills, and the bonds to face anything together. The cowboy had become an integral part of their lives, a steady presence who had helped transform fear into hope, struggle into progress, and uncertainty into security. She felt gratitude, relief, and a deep sense of connection, knowing that together they had built not just a house, but a life filled with possibility, trust, and care.